This week, we ask just what it takes for you to commit to going back to Lodge. Greg Knott applies some pretty tough filters to his Lodge experience. Then, Brother Randy Sanders asks, when's the last time you had a festive board for the heck of it? He's got some great recommendations, and I'll give you some of my own personal insights onto that festive board event and what it brings to the Masonic experience. Finally, we'll ask the big question: does all that memory work really ever pay off, making a good man better? We'll hear from a Ph.D. on understanding the neuroscience of repetition and what some brothers take away from this repetition and memorization of ritual work. All this and more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
Welcome back. This is episode number 506. I want to thank our contributors, our fellows, our producers, and our legacy partners for all of your help in continuing to bring the WCY podcast to the masses week after week, month after month, and year after year. Since 2011, you all have assisted in bringing Masonic education to the world to over 3 million people. If you're curious how you can assist in bringing this Masonic light to the world, head on over to WCYpodcast.com, click on Support the Show, and see how you can help by giving a monthly contribution or simply by making a one-time gift. All money goes right back into the production of this show and assists in bringing forth continued and improved Masonic education. Now, if you're not looking to do something like that, but you'd like to do some shopping, well, we do have some cool stuff that is available on our website as well. And all of those sales also go right back into this. And so that is, of course, we have a producer's pin, which you can purchase and show everybody what you're all about, and the pin that you love, representing the podcast that you love. We also launched a new product called the Craftsman Plus Journal and Pen. Now, our contributors, our financial contributors to this program, are no strangers to the Craftsman Plus Facebook group, where we do some live journaling on prepared topics that we talk about in the show. And we have some great conversations there. But if you're somebody who really likes to write their thoughts down, we did go ahead and launch a really great full-grain leather bound notebook that comes with a walnut pen, and it's fantastic. So if you're interested in that, that is also available in the shop, as well as a number of other books that we have available. Books like Max Heindel's Ancient and Modern Initiation, Special Edition, or The Master's Word, a short treatise on the Word, the Light, and the Self, which is, of course, annotated by myself and Brother John Ruark. We've got How to Charter a Lodge, a no-nonsense, unsanctioned guide. You can also get the time-tested and brother-approved It's Business Time, Adapting a Corporate Path for Freemasonry, as well as a number of other things that are available. And all of those things, if you buy from our website, all of those books come autographed by me, and of course, everything else is shipped by me too. So, this is an actual from me to you thing. So, if you can support us in some of these endeavors, that's awesome, and we thank you very much. And I also just want to say again, I really want to thank all those people out there who like and share our podcast, subscribe, hit those notifications, and all of those things, because that all helps bring this Masonic education to everyone and actually legitimizes what we're doing. There's a lot of misinformation out there on Freemasonry, and of course, this is one reason why we are legitimate, is because we have the great buy-in from all of you, the listeners, and of course, we're not out there spreading misinformation. So thank you all so much for that. I wanted to bring your attention to a new website called MasonicConferences.com. I teamed up with Brother Alex Powers of the Historical Light podcast, and we launched a website that brings together some great stuff. What kind of great stuff? Well, there's all these Masonic conferences out there in the world, all across the United States. How do you know when they're happening? How do you know where they are? Well, we're trying to bring them all to this website, and of course there you can see the details and just links back to their original websites, and we try to keep the most up-to-date information available for those conferences happening around the United States, so no matter where you are, you can go ahead and attend. From California to Chicago to Ohio, Texas, New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Kansas, Virginia, and more. It's all going to be there, and we're going to try to keep everything current just as best as we can. So check out that website if you're looking to attend a cool Masonic conference. Additionally, we've got MasonicInstruction.com, Initially, it was something that I launched, but I partnered up with Alex Powers later on because he has been an immense help in the world of web production. You guys should know that it's a wonderful website for you to find a speaker for your lodge, whether they want to Zoom in or come out in person, which may or may not be an issue here moving forward, just due to that Delta variant. But check out that website. There's a number of people on there, and you can search by topics or larger umbrella topics, philosophy or history or those kinds of things. And you'll find somebody who is ready and willing to give you a lecture. And there's a great number of different prepared topics for them and all of their information. And you get to contact them directly. So you don't have to go through me or anything when you send an email through the website. It goes right to those people. Recently, I was asked about how do you bring Masonic education into a lodge? What's the proper way? Because you can't just jump in there and throw a topic to the wind and hope things catch on. You get rolled eyes, people slapping at their watch, hey, it's late, you're taking too long kind of thing. So what's the best way to introduce Masonic education into your meetings? Well, I have written a response to that kind of email several times, and I'm not sure why it didn't dawn on me before, but I think what we're going to end up doing is putting together a series of articles about the proper and best practices in bringing education into your lodge, how to introduce the topic of education, of having it, who to go to talk about starting an educational series or what have you. And so that'll be coming up probably in the next several months. We'll just release an article every once in a while on that. I did want to mention that the Illinois Lodge of Research has a big event coming up. That's our annual meeting, and not to be too regional here, but this isn't, on several occasions I have read works from brothers who published in the Illinois Lodge of Research's transactions. And we are, in fact, having our annual meeting happening on October 8th, 2021 at 3 p.m. It's going to be at the Wyndham Hotel, Plaza Room 3, as it always is. And we've got a great presenter. We're going to have Midnight Freemason co-managing editor and area education officer, Worshipful Brother Darren A. Laners. Now, Brother Darren is going to be presenting on a really cool topic that he's written about in the past, but his presentation goes far beyond just what is in his writings. That's going to be Harry Potter and Freemasonry, if you can believe it. If you want to see a little promo clip that we put together for that, head on over to illinoislodgeofresearch.org. I'll put a link in the show notes for anybody out there who's curious. If you want to see this presentation, well, you're probably going to have to be there unless I can finagle some kind of a way to film it and live stream it for our brothers who can't make it. But in any event, if you are interested in joining that body of research, you can just click the join button at the top, fill out your online digital application, click submit, goes right on over to our secretary, Brother Tim, and then right underneath that, if you're all done with the application, pay $10 a year. It's like the cheapest Masonic thing in the whole world and probably one of the best value. As we jokingly refer to it as King Solomon approved. So all that out of the way, let's get into this week's education. And I want to start it off with a little something here from Brother Greg Knott. I wanted to share with you last week, but I ran out of time. And he wrote this great short piece called Coming Back is Not Easy by Senior Midnight Freemason contributor, Worshipful Brother Gregory J. Knott. He says, I don't know about you, but returning to meetings for the Blue Lodge and other groups has been harder than I thought. After basically a year of not attending meetings in person, I've come to see I have a different perspective on the necessity of my attendance. I haven't had as much free time as I did in the last year since I was very young, and I have very much enjoyed not going to as many meetings. As we get back into full speed, I have personally made the determination that I'm going to attend meetings I wish to attend, not because I have to attend. My days of going to mindless business meetings that really serve no purpose other than to plan the next mindless business meeting or talk about who is behind on paying dues are going to be limited. This isn't to imply that I am down on Freemasonry, because I am not. However, for me, Freemasonry isn't reading the minutes, talking about a roof for months on end, or complaining about the same guys who don't pay their dues on time year after year. Freemasonry to me should be educational opportunities, fellowship, service to others, and work within the community, all with the purpose of individual self-improvement. What are your thoughts on returning to the lodge? Do you look at things differently? Are you satisfied with the way things were going before the pandemic and hope they return? I am curious about your thoughts and perspectives. Please leave them here in the comments or on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Midnight Freemasons. Worshipful Brother Gregory J. Knott. Now, just a quick short piece from him, but I thought it was really interesting because I too feel the same way. But I'm not so obliged to go to so many organizations. I'm not a member of tons of places. I'm really involved in just the basics, right? Which is my Blue Lodge, I'm involved in my AMD, and I'm involved with my Scottish Rite. My Royal Arch chapter, my Cryptic Council are doing very well, and one day I'll have more time to give back to that. But as Greg pointed out, if you're not needed for that particular type of meeting, maybe there's not a real great reason to go. So that's what I'd like to ask you for a Craftsman Plus. Just really quickly, I'd just echo Greg's sentiments here. What are your thoughts on returning to Lodge? Do you look at things differently? I'd love to hear your responses. All right, now this next piece is interesting only because quite often people say, "Hey RJ, what are you doing Saturday morning?" And it's like after the first Friday of the month when I have our business meeting, and I say, "Well, I'm not really doing anything. I probably won't make your big event happening 4 hours away." Well, why not? Because our stated meetings for Space Novum last until the AM, usually. And we start at 7:30. And I get down to the lodge about 5. So lodge day for me lasts from about 4 o'clock in the afternoon until about 2 a.m. Now, that's not for everybody. In fact, most people think that's just egregious. One part of the reason for our late meetings is we've got this festive board after every meeting. You know, this great meal where we're discussing things and some toasts and really enjoying each other's company. And as the evening kind of tapers off, people kind of stand up, go around, shake hands, and leave for the evening and head on home. And it's always a wonderful thing, right? But recently, Brother Randy Sanders on the Midnight Freemasons wrote a piece called "Let's Make Time for the Festive Board!" Exclamation point. Let's check out what he has to say. When was the last time you truly celebrated something? For many of us, we can raise our hands with an answer of last month or this spring because of COVID shutdowns and isolation. Let's change that answer of meh we celebrated by maintaining the joy we found in returning to labor. We often make a meeting a little special by way of a congratulatory cake or small celebration for a 50-year pin or a barbecue, or possibly a congratulatory cake, or possibly a breakfast, dinner fundraiser. When is the last time your lodge did a festive board for no reason except the festive board? When is the last time your lodge put on a party for no reason? I think now's the time. I recently expressed a similar idea for combining the festive board with a Valley Library fundraiser, and I'll work with the St. Louis Valley to follow through on that. However, I'm also pushing to get more festive boards going in local lodges. This tradition seems to be overlooked by many in how many new brothers were waiting on COVID before receiving the degrees. This tradition seems to be overlooked by many, and how many new brothers were waiting on COVID before receiving the degrees. How many of those new brothers would benefit from a good social time honoring Masonic traditions and learning a bit more about Freemasonry during a festive board? It can and should be included in the new brothers' experiences, and who knows? Maybe those new brothers decide to pick up the torch and organize the next one. In some areas, festive boards and table lodges are close to the same thing. However, in my jurisdiction, Missouri, they are quite different. I bring this up as you may need Grand Lodge dispensation before putting on a table lodge or a festive board. And it's worth the time to investigate with your own Grand Lodge, your lodge bylaws, and the Grand Lodge bylaws what permissions are needed. This investigation may also generate interest from the Grand Lodge, and that's a good thing. Recommendations for making the festive board or table lodge a success can be found in old minutes from various lodges, but the biggest initial recommendation is to play up the novelty. That is, focus on the positive of doing something different. Find a speaker. If you are fortunate to know local brothers comfortable in presenting educational topics, have them do a short 20 to 30 minute presentation on a fun topic. Masonic education may not be the only way to make the evening memorable, but it's a fair bet that a good education topic will start some discussion afterward. Does it have to be Masonic? Check with your Grand Lodge about how open your festive boards might be. Mine are not tiled, but we're still careful in topics. and how we phrase certain words and subjects. Inviting the local mayor or a city council member to speak may get you closer to the community. Inviting the local officers of the Toastmasters organization to give a speech they wrote for Toastmasters can be an excellent lesson in rhetoric. I'm sure you get the idea that a good presentation can come from many different sources with a little investigation. Keep it short. What? Why? The festive board or table lodge itself shouldn't be very long. Multiple long toasts need to be broken up with announcements or quick topics for discussion. I found a couple hours including refreshments to be the limit of my own enjoyment, and then I can retire to the patio or designated area for less formal conversations over a beverage of choice. Many brethren enjoy an occasional cigar with that beverage, and that can mean another hour or more just hanging out, spreading the cement of brotherly love. Oh yeah, and definitely put the word out that you'll need designated drivers. Brother Randy Sanders. Great topic, great discussion, I love it. You know, we do a festive board at Space Novum after each stated meeting as just part of the meeting. It is a given at each meeting that we do, with the exception of during the COVID months. We had to make some slight adjustments, and sometimes we just didn't do it. But we're back in business right now and plan on having our festive boards. They usually go from 9:30 to about 11:30, midnight. And then, of course, the drive home, the cleanup afterwards for your lodge members who stick around while the rest, kind of disperse. That's when I get home at about 2 a.m. or so. But it's always a great time, and it's always a wonderful opportunity to have this kind of great fellowship. And it's great because it's not constrained by the Masonic protocols that we have within the Blue Lodge or within the Symbolic Lodge. As Brother Randy points out, many times after the meeting is done, guys will retire to different areas of the lodge or different areas of wherever the venue is going to be and hang out and have a drink and do these kinds of things. So I totally agree with Brother Randy. If you're not doing festive boards, it's time to start. It's really fun and doesn't even require any kind of wild or crazy planning. Just say, hey, we're going to have a festive board, and check with your Grand Lodge on the rules. In Illinois, there's the Table Lodge, which, has a ritual. It's a table lodge, but a festive board here in Illinois, and traditionally, is just a meal where anybody can come. And a lot of times these are given on the solstices or the St. John's days, right? And this is a fantastic experience and reason to do these. If you do them on the equinox, it certainly lends to having a great Masonic speaker in the realm of those kinds of topics. So have fun with it. And again, you could have a pizza table lodge. You could have a pizza festive board. It doesn't matter. It's about getting together for a meal, having some toasts, even if those toasts are with grape juice. Just have fun. And again, as Brother Randy points out, it's important to involve your Grand Lodge if it's something that they regulate. Like Grand Lodge regulates table lodges in Illinois. So we do have to get our dispensations. Festive boards is just a dinner, so we don't do anything for that. And there is no Masonic protocol because it isn't addressed and is not Masonic outside of having brothers there. And, for that matter, there can be other people there at a festive board as well. Our ladies, for instance. In one instance, we had a festive board after a third degree and invited all of our ladies who met us at the event venue, who had already been hanging out, already having drinks, and already having basically family time with their new sister, as it were, by the time the guys got there from the lodge. Appetizers were already ordered and everything. We got there and we just had a great time. And, this is the festive board. It's a time to be festive. So my question for you, the Craftsman Plus, is when is the last time you did a festive board if it is not a part of your regular stated meeting? Now we come to the topic at hand for the episode. You often hear this idea that the ritual of Freemasonry, that rote memorization of the obligations and charges and things like this, does not mean that you are a Freemason or that you understand it. But it is the hope that the constant repetition of this assists you in understanding it, but at the very least, maybe living it. Recently, scoping the internet, I found an article called Understanding Learning and Memory, the Neuroscience of Repetition. Now, when I talk about repetition here, let's talk about Freemasonry and repetition. We have a lot of repetition, whether it's our obligations, our memorizing ritual, or it is just the performance of ritual over and over again. So let's see what this has to say in a purely scientific frame of mind. This is by Gretchen Skelsmeyer, produced on January 11th, 2015, from her own website, which I will link back to. She is a Ph.D. How do we learn things? How can we make change? If we have done it once, why do we find ourselves falling back on old habits? Maybe the first thing to understand is how our brain creates memory. It is important to understand the basics of memory in order to understand learning and change. It is also important to understand the basics of memory in order to better understand traumatic memory. And I want you to understand how the brain makes memories so you can understand why practice and repetition are so important. In today's blog, I will simply start with the idea that information comes in through our senses, our ears, eyes, skin, nose, or taste buds. And this information gets routed either through the low road, the amygdala, our emergency flight emotional memory storage center, or the high road, the hippocampus cortex, our memory storage center. And once information comes in, it needs to be encoded. And by that, I mean it needs to be written in a language the brain understands so it can be stored and remembered. Here we make a distinction between short-term memory and long-term memory. Short-term, or what is also called working memory, is the holding area where information stays when it first comes in. Someone tells us their phone number and we repeat it back, keeping it in working memory. It's like a whiteboard you scribble on in your brain for your incoming information. Short-term memory lasts minutes. When short-term memory makes the shift to long-term memory can last days, weeks, years, or forever. How does information move from short-term memory to long-term memory? There are only 3 ways that information can move from short-term memory to long-term memory: urgency, repetition, or association. Urgency, with the release of stress hormones, creates a powerful wash of chemicals that strengthens the connection between neurons or synapses. And urgency also determines how and where the brain encodes the information into long-term memory. Urgency can create a very long-lasting memory. After a single exposure to a threat, the amygdala can retain that memory for an entire lifespan. However, the encoding or labeling of the event, the ability to recall or retrieve the memory, can be more troublesome and not under conscious control, so that the information gets stored with an emotional rather than a narrative marker. I can pass by where I had a car accident and get anxious, even if I don't have a conscious memory of the event. Repetition. Repetition is the most familiar learning tool. Everyone has memorized facts or vocabulary words by repeating them, and some have improved basketball free throw shooting or playing piano scales through practice. Repetition creates long-term memory by eliciting or enacting strong chemical interactions at the synapse of your neuron, where neurons connect to other neurons. Repetition creates the strongest learning and most learning, both implicit, like tying your shoes, and explicit, multiplication tables. They rely on repetition. It is also why it is so hard to make behavior change, because the new behavior must be repeated for so long, and the old behavior must be held in check. Association is the ability for a piece of information to tap into a neural connection that already exists. It's the equivalent of already having a file folder for the new learning to go into. For example, if I read a list of 10 numbers out loud and asked you to remember them and say them back to me, typically you would find this a difficult task. But if the 10 numbers also happened to be your phone number, then the task would be easy. And if I asked you a year later what the numbers were, you would still be able to give them to me because they were already a part of the previous neural connection. All 3 of these methods affect the neurons or synapse level in a similar way for long-term memory. The stimulation from urgency, repetition, or association will actually create new proteins inside your neuron. At the level of the synapse, a self-perpetuating protein is created which keeps the connection going between neurons. This is a long-lasting self-perpetuating protein, and it gets strengthened with repetition. in addition to this self-perpetuating cycle, the neuron, through the protein process, also creates a new synaptic terminal growth to increase the connection. It adds another branch on its tree to strengthen and increase the network. So repetition actually grows the brain's neural network. So with a rare exception, repetition is the only real option for learning, unlearning, and relearning. And yet, as adults, we so often believe that we can and must learn everything fast. Everything is supposed to be 3 easy steps, or maybe 5, but not 100. We are designed to learn through practice. Can you imagine how hokey it would sound to say, play the cello like Yo-Yo Ma in 3 easy steps? It would be absurd. Elite musicians spend 15 years of practice to become the artists that they are. And depending upon what you are trying to learn, trying to heal, trying to unlearn, or relearn, it can take a long time too. It's okay. It's the way we were designed to learn, and our own internal symphonies are worth the practice and time and care. Gretchen L. Skelsmeyer, Ph.D., 2015. Really fascinating article here, and breaks this down in ways that we can comprehend. Now, for most Freemasons, when we're talking about these things, I'm not just talking about ritual learning, because that's that repetition. But what I'm curious about is, does the repetition of the words cause an actual physical act of acting in a way that corresponds to the words that you memorized? In other words, if I'm always talking about being on the level, in real life, do I actually act on the level? And the more I do that, does that repetitive behavior then strengthen the way I act and make it so often enough? May 29th, 2020, there was an article posted to the Grand Lodge of New Hampshire's Free and Accepted Masons. I'll put a link back in the show notes to this article, but the article is by Right Worshipful Brother Christopher J. Bubsey, who is a Grand Lecturer. And he begins with a quote from Joseph Campbell. A ritual is the enactment of a myth, and by practicing in the ritual, you are practicing the myth. By participating in the ritual, you are being put in accord with wisdom, which is the wisdom that is inherent within you anyhow. Your consciousness is being reminded of the wisdom of your own life. I think ritual is terribly important. Joseph Campbell. Christopher J. Bubsey goes on. Our ritual is the heart and soul of the fraternity. All our tenets, philosophies, and myths reside there. Without it, we would simply be another social or charitable club. Our ritual sets us apart. It binds us with each other and with every Mason throughout time. Masonic ritual is not simply made up of the words. Indeed, any individual with access with the internet can obtain a wealth of information about the forms and ceremonies of the craft. Does one that simply reads the ritual become a Mason? Of course, the answer is no. Without the right men to join us, and without the right experience to act as a catalyst for the transformation, the words are merely ideas. One may look upon our ritual as meditation, the opening and closing of a lodge, the floor work of a degree. Our charges are inculcated to center us to our labors, to teach as well as to remind, to unite us around a guiding set of principles and awaken our spirits. Our ritual is performed in consecrated temples, which are meant to be sacred and separate from the everyday world. There, we navigate along our paths, from the material to the spiritual. Our temples are the vessels in which we individually and collectively channel communication to the divine. Every time we enact or experience one of our degrees, we are living and moving together in sacred time and space. We are being initiated again and renewing our obligations. Now think back to the day that you were initiated. Did the experience match your expectations? What elements of that day have been permanently impressed upon your mind? Are there aspects of the degree that fell short? And why? Think about the ritual that you last performed or witnessed. With what intention was the ritual given? Did it feel serious, solemn, important, transcendent? Did it invoke emotion? Did it illuminate the wisdom within you? Was Masonic light transmitted? Brethren, I hope that in the coming year we can explore these concepts and questions further. And he ends the piece there with his email address, which, if you're interested, you can check out when you link back to the original article. But a really great perspective here, particularly when he says to teach us as well as remind us, constant reminders, to act a certain way. And then by acting that way each time, we become a little more like that perfected peace. Now, Richardson Masonic Lodge, number 1214, on their website had a condensed article by Michael Mayer called The Hidden Lessons from Ritual Work. Let's check out what he has to say. So many times we seem to look at ritual work as not being that important and that it doesn't have to be done that well. We feel that we just need to have more Masons for our lodges. If we fail to share the teaching, well, who do you think loses? Please think back to that first night when you became a Mason. It is a night we all share. That night, most of us were apprehensive and confused as to what was going to happen. Those first words you heard said at the lodge door, asking questions and wanting answers of you, and how you were treated was only the start of your Masonic life. I hope it's a life that leads us on a continuous journey of Masonic travel and education. By memorizing the degrees and obligations, we share something no one else can understand. The task of learning them, which we choose to do, is something we did. The struggle teaches us what we all can do with hard work and a true desire to accomplish things. So many times I have listened to the lectures, and I still find them as interesting as the first time I had heard them. Every time I hear them, I find a new perspective that I may have missed before. I fear for those who choose not to listen to them in this way. I fear that they will never find many of the lessons Masonry is attempting to teach us. As for those that give those grand lectures, they learn as well. They learn how it feels to give that perfect lecture, and also when they do not get it perfectly right. We can all learn lessons here too. First, how we should overlook everyone's little mistakes that we all make in life. And secondly, we all need to remember that sometimes the best intentions to wrong are by accident. Being a Mason is not simply a series of tasks to be completed by memorizing questions and answers and repeating them one time. It's a lifelong journey toward a perfection that few, if any of us, will ever accomplish. But we are better men, husbands, fathers, and brothers, for starting and continually attempting to complete the walk. Now, there you have another perspective here. In this particular article, what I took away from it is where he says that every time he listens to the lectures, he hears something new. And I think this is true for me too. Every time I listen to them, I pick up a little bit more. And I also memorize a little bit more just by listening to what's actually happening in the lodge. It's very interesting the way this works. This repetition, hearing it, reading it, saying it. And then when I'm out in the world and I attempt to live it, over and over again, it becomes second nature. It becomes who I am, who we are. For a Craftsman Plus, I'd like to know your opinion on this. Does the repetition, first by words, then by actions, lead to a better us? That's it for this week. I want to thank you all for being with me and going on this little adventure in the repetition of memory work and becoming a better person. Once more, I want to thank our contributors, fellows, producers, and legacy partners. Without you, we can't make this program. If you want to learn more, head on over to wcypodcast.com, click on support the show, and check out all your options there. Next week, we're going to have a special guest. More on that when you hear the episode. Can't give too much information away on that, but it'll be fun, I promise. Until next week, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson. Take care.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.